he didn't look at her when he said it. That was what Celeste Dunmore would remember most, later. Not the words themselves, not the table of strangers watching her face for a reaction, not the sound of silverware going very still across the dining room. What she would remember years afterward was that Patrick Hollis stared at the centerpiece arrangement while he told her she wasn't what his family needed. "We want someone who fits the Hollis image." That was how his mother, Constance, had phrased it 20 minutes earlier, with the smooth delivery of someone who had rehearsed the sentence in the car ride over. She hadn't pretended to smile when Celeste arrived. She had looked at her the way people look at a coat someone else chose for them, politely tolerant, privately disappointed. Patrick had said nothing then. He'd reached for his wine glass instead. For 4 years, Celeste had believed his silence meant comfort. She understood now that it had always meant cowardice. "I think we should take a break," Patrick said, still not looking at her. "Clarissa," he gestured toward a slender woman 2 tables away, someone Celeste hadn't known existed until that moment. "She understands the kind of life I'm building." A break. Celeste sat with that word like it was a stone placed in her lap. Around the table, no one spoke. Patrick's younger brother examined the floor. His mother lifted her wine with the faint expression of a woman watching an unfortunate necessity resolve itself. Celeste had spent 20 minutes getting ready that evening. She'd chosen the dark green dress because Patrick had once said it made her look elegant. She'd done her hair twice. She had arrived 10 minutes early because she always arrived early, because she had spent 4 years believing that being reliable was the thing that made her worth keeping. She was still sitting in her chair, hands pressed flat against the tablecloth to keep them from shaking when the room changed. She felt it before she understood it. The private booth along the far wall, 4 men mid-conversation, someone's deal being quietly negotiated over aged scotch, went completely silent. One of them leaned toward another. A glass was set down without being finished, and then she heard footsteps, unhurried, deliberate. Theron Ashby crossed the dining room without looking at anyone but her. He was not a man who entered spaces. He was a man who altered them simply by choosing to occupy them. 43 years old, dark suit. No tie, the kind of stillness that told you had never once needed to raise his voice to be heard. He moved with the particular ease of someone who had long since stopped explaining himself to the world. He stopped at the edge of her chair. Without a word, he removed his jacket and settled it over Celeste's shoulders. Not dramatically, not possessively. With the quiet care of someone covering a window against cold air, his eyes moved to Patrick only once the jacket was in place. "I believe you were leaving," he said. Patrick blinked. "Excuse me?" "You made a decision." Theron's voice carried no heat whatsoever. "I'm respecting it. You should too." Constance Hollis set down her fork. The patrician composure she'd worn all evening cracked at the edges because the men at the private booth had not resumed their conversation, because 2 of them had quietly stood, because the maitre had materialized near the entrance, wearing the soft, apologetic expression of a man preparing to deliver unwelcome guidance. Someone at the table whispered a name. Celeste didn't catch it. Patrick did. His face changed immediately, the practiced confidence he brought to every Hollis family function draining out of him in the space of 3 seconds, leaving something pale and unsteady underneath. "Mr. Ashby," he said, "I didn't realize you." "You didn't." Theron turned back to Celeste. His voice dropped slightly, meant only for her. "Can you stand?" She looked up at him. "Yes," she said, because the alternative was admitting she couldn't trust her own legs. He offered his arm, not his hand, not a grip, just an offer, and waited while she decided. Celeste stood. They walked out together. Behind her, she heard Patrick say her name once. She didn't stop. She heard Constance ask something sharp and receive no answer. She kept her eyes on the lobby ahead, on the wide, cool space where no one was watching with pity disguised as concern. Outside, the car was already there, black, quiet, warm. Celeste sat against the door and watched Chicago pass in streaks of gold and white through the window. She was still wearing his jacket. It smelled like cedar and something darker beneath that, something she couldn't put a name to. Neither of them spoke for a while. Eventually, she said, "How long have you known who I am?" Theron sat with the easy stillness of someone genuinely comfortable with silence. 8 months. I noticed you at the Harlow on the night of the Pelletier closing dinner, a Tuesday. She turned. That was a routine Tuesday. You were the last one leaving. The final table of guests had knocked over a full tray of glassware. You helped the busboy clean it up. He looked forward through the windshield. You already had your coat on. Your bag was over your shoulder. You could have walked straight out. He was 19, she said. He was panicking. Most people in your position would have kept walking. She said nothing to that. You're the senior bookkeeper at Harlow & Sons. He continued, as if reading from something he had long since memorized. 3 years. You caught the Denton filing error in February before it became a full audit, and you've never taken credit for it in a single meeting. Last Thursday, you ordered dinner for the kitchen staff out of your own pocket because they were running 4 hours over shift. She stared at him. You knew all of that. You thought nothing important was watching. He glanced at her. I was. The car moved through the city. Celeste pulled his jacket tighter without thinking about it. Patrick's been angling toward a partnership with the Pemberton family for over a year, Theron said, after a beat. Clarissa Pemberton is the only daughter. He made a calculation. He said it without inflection, the way someone names a weather pattern. I know. And she did. She had known for longer than she'd admitted to herself, had felt it in the way Patrick introduced her at events, always with a slight hesitation before her name, as if deciding in real time whether to include her. She had felt it when he started suggesting she skip dessert, when he said things like you'd photograph better in something more structured, and smiled as if that were care. She had told herself those were small things. Small things didn't count. She said none of this out loud, but somehow the silence between them had enough space in it that she felt heard anyway. How long did it go on? Theron asked quietly. She looked out the window. The comments started about a year in. Nothing dramatic. Maybe the style would be more flattering. Maybe the salad would be better. The Hollises tend to be very active. You'd feel better if... She stopped. The words had come out faster than she meant them to, and now they were in the car, and she couldn't take them back. He waited. I joined 2 gyms, she said. I rewrote my whole wardrobe. I hired a nutritionist for 3 months. She looked at her hands. I kept apologizing. He'd say something, and I'd be the one who apologized, like I was the one who had done something wrong. Because you believed you had. She didn't answer, because he was right. I coordinated the Hollis family New Year's party, she said instead. Patrick asked me to, as a way of getting closer to the family. I spent 6 weeks on it, every florist, caterer, lighting designer, string quartet. I interviewed 11 musicians. A small, humorless exhale. Constance thanked the event planner from 2 years prior, who had done nothing except refer me. You didn't correct her. I thought it wasn't the right moment. She smiled faintly at the window. She was always thinking it wasn't the right moment. She had accumulated years' worth of wrong moments where the right one never seemed to arrive. The car stopped in front of her building on Dearborn. Theron got out first and opened the door. Celeste stepped onto the sidewalk, still wearing his jacket, aware that she had been wearing it for 45 minutes and had no clear intention of giving it back yet. Why did you come over? She asked. He considered the question the same way he considered everything, fully, without rushing. Because someone should have. He didn't wait for her to answer that. He just nodded once and got back in the car. She went in. Inside, she sat in her kitchen in his jacket and drank tea she didn't remember making, and at some point she cried, not dramatically, not with any particular cause she could point to, just the quiet release of something that had been held too long. Not over Patrick, over something older and more accumulated than Patrick, over every time she had made herself smaller to fit inside a space that still hadn't wanted her. 3 weeks passed. Celeste went back to work. She did what she always did. Caught the numbers other people missed, stayed late when the systems needed updating, learned the name of every new server and hostess who came through. She did not read the text Patrick sent on the 4th day. Theron's driver came for the jacket on a Monday. He also left a black coffee with no note, as though the gesture required no explanation. She told herself it meant nothing. She told herself that a few more times over the following weeks, each time a coffee appeared on her desk, each time she found herself checking her phone for a short message that asked simply whether she had eaten, or noted that she had worked through her lunch again. She had not given him her number. She chose not to examine how he had it. 5 weeks after the Harrington dinner, the Ashby Foundation held its annual fundraiser at the Metropolitan Club. Celeste had been asked, by the Foundation's event coordinator, to handle the financial reconciliation for the evening. She arrived early, as she always did. She checked in with the catering staff by name. She found the event manager. She helped a flustered intern locate missing microphone cables. She did not expect to see Patrick Hollis walk in at 8:15. He'd come with 2 colleagues from his firm. Not Clarissa, she noted. He was working the room with the particular energy of a man who had recently concluded that not all bridges should stay burned. She watched him spot Theron across the room, watched his glass lower slightly, watched the calculation happen in real time behind his eyes. He crossed the room toward her. Celeste set down the donor list she'd been reviewing and waited with the same stillness she used during audits, the kind that means, I already see exactly what this is. Celeste, he smiled the way he always had, warm, slightly rueful. You look, it's good to see you. I've been thinking. I know, she said. He kept going. What happened at the Harrington? I wasn't clear. I was under pressure with a deal, and I said things I didn't mean. The Pemberton deal fell through, she said. Not a question. She had seen the filing 4 days ago in the Regional Business Index. His smile shrank at the edges. That's not why I'm here. You told me I wasn't what your family needed, she said. Her voice stayed level, not cold. Level, which required more. In front of 12 people, while gesturing toward another woman, she looked at him steadily. I'm genuinely curious what part of that you feel was unclear. He reached for her hand. She moved it before he could reach it. I'm not angry, Patrick, she found, saying it, that it was almost entirely true. I think I used up most of what I had to feel about you a long time before the Harrington. She looked at him directly. I just don't need you to explain yourself to me. He straightened. He had always needed an audience. He raised his voice just enough for the nearest cluster of guests to register it. I made a mistake. A serious one. I hurt someone who stood by me for 4 years, and I'm not leaving without saying that. Around them, heads turned. A few people paused mid-conversation. Celeste watched him perform the apology he had rehearsed and felt nothing except the quiet satisfaction of understanding exactly what she was looking at. A man who had learned who Theron Ashby was, who had done the arithmetic, and who had returned not because he missed her, but because the equation had changed. She opened her mouth. His hand closed around her wrist. It wasn't violent. It was worse than violent. It was proprietary. The grip of someone who still believed, in some fundamental and unexamined way, that she was a thing that could be reclaimed. She went still. Then another hand appeared, unhurried. 2 fingers around Patrick's wrist with the quiet and absolute authority of a man who had never needed to make a point more than once. Theron said, "Let go." Patrick released her. Celeste stepped back and found herself standing beside Theron without having decided to move, which felt like the most natural thing that had happened all evening. "You don't understand what this is," Patrick said. "I understand completely." Theron's voice had the quality it always had. No heat, no performance, just the sound of certainty. "You made a calculation at the Harrington. The calculation changed. Now you're here." He let a beat pass. "The only thing different is the information. We were together 4 years. And during those 4 years," Theron said, "you told her she took up too much space. You criticized how she looked and how she ate. You convinced her that love was something she had to earn." He looked at Patrick with complete stillness. "And then when you found a more convenient option, you made the trade, in a room full of people who mattered to her." Silence spread out from their corner of the ballroom. "I already apologized," Patrick said. "You performed an apology. There's a difference." Patrick looked at Celeste. His expression had the texture of genuine feeling, or something he believed was genuine feeling, which might have been the same thing. "Tell him I've changed." She looked back at him. She thought about the 2 gym memberships she'd let lapse. The dress she'd returned because he said the color wasn't right. The dinner parties, where she'd spent too long in the kitchen, refilling platters because it was easier than sitting at the table, waiting to feel like she belonged there. She thought about a Tuesday night in February, a broken tray of glassware, a teenager who was panicking, and a man in a dark suit who had apparently been paying closer attention than anyone she had asked to love her. "I believe you've changed," she said to Patrick, and meant it honestly. "I just don't think that has anything to do with me anymore." 2 members of the Foundation's security team appeared at the perimeter of the room, quiet and efficient. They didn't touch him. They simply positioned themselves so that the next step became obvious. Patrick looked at Theron one last time. His voice came out lower than he intended. "You don't even know her." Theron didn't hesitate. "I know enough." Patrick left. The room exhaled. Conversations resumed in the careful way conversations resume after being interrupted by something real. The musicians, who had paused almost imperceptibly, found their measure in the score again. Celeste stood still for a moment, hands loose at her sides. Then she went back to work. There were still 2 hours of the event remaining, and the silent auction needed monitoring, and one of the servers looked like he was heading into a conflict with the kitchen timeline. She handled each thing in turn. She thanked every person by name. Theron watched from near the windows. At 10:15, the event wound down. Volunteers began the gentle dismantling of the evening. Celeste was collecting the last of the donor receipts when one of the younger interns touched her arm. "You don't have to do that." The young woman shook her head firmly. "You've been on your feet since 5. We'll close up." Celeste looked around at the remaining staff. Most of them she recognized from previous Foundation events. Most of them had received, at some point, a word of thanks from her. A held door, a shared umbrella, a note left to make sure the kitchen team got to eat before cleanup. She handed over the envelopes. Outside, the October air was cold and clean. Lake Michigan was invisible past the skyline, but she could feel the presence of it, that vast, patient dark water that had been there before the city and would be there after. Theron came to stand beside her on the building's stone steps. He held 2 cups of coffee, black, both of them, because she had mentioned once months ago that she didn't take anything in hers. She accepted hers without comment. "You knew he wasn't apologizing," she said. "Yes. You knew before I did. I suspected. You figured it out yourself." He looked out at the city. Faster than you give yourself credit for. She wrapped both hands around the cup. He would never have come back if it weren't for you. Not because of anything I did or am. Because of what the association means. She said it plainly, not bitterly. I know that. Does it change anything? She thought about it honestly. No, it mostly just makes everything clearer. She paused. I spent 4 years trying to become someone he'd choose without conditions. What's strange is, I don't think I was trying to keep him. I think I was trying to prove I was worth choosing at all. Theron was quiet, the way he was quiet when he was listening, rather than waiting for his turn. I used to think confidence was something you built, she said. From the inside, through discipline and effort. Now I think maybe it's something you borrow from the way people treat you. She looked at him. And you have treated me like I matter. You do. You say it like it's obvious. It is obvious. She laughed, which surprised her, a short, genuine sound in the cold October air. He reached into his jacket. Not for a ring. She noticed it wasn't a ring, and felt oddly, precisely understood for the noticing. He produced a folded piece of paper. She recognized it immediately. A printed internal scheduling memo from Harlow and Sons, dated 7 months back, with her own handwriting in the margin, and found that 2 servers were being asked to close after a back-to-back double op. She had written quickly without thinking. These 2 can't close Friday. They've already done 10 hours. Reassign, or I'm staying to cover. She stared at it. You kept a scheduling memo. I kept evidence. He folded it with care and returned it to his pocket. Of who you are when you believe nothing important is watching. She felt something in her throat go tight. I carry it, he said, because genuinely kind people are rarer than most things I've spent my life acquiring. He looked at her, and because it reminded me, every time I looked at it, that the person I wanted to know had been standing in a restaurant 3 blocks from my office for 3 years. The tears came quietly. Not breaking, more like something loosening, some long-held thing finally permitted to move. She didn't try to stop them. He produced a handkerchief with the efficiency of a man who had anticipated this, or something close enough to it, and had prepared accordingly. She took it. She almost smiled. You carry a handkerchief. I carry many things. That's either reassuring or alarming. It can be both. She laughed again, and this time it didn't surprise her at all. He waited until the moment had run its course, until she was standing there with her coffee going cold and the city making its ordinary indifferent noise below. Then simply, I'd like to know you, not fix you, not change you. He looked at her with the same directness she had been learning was just how he saw everything, clearly, without softening it first. The way you already know everyone around you, completely. She looked at him for a long moment. 4 years of small erasures, of shrinking and apologizing and arriving early and choosing the dress he preferred and believing, sincerely, earnestly believing, that if she fixed one more thing, she would finally be enough. She was standing on stone steps in October, with a stranger's handkerchief in her hand, and for the first time in longer than she could clearly recall, she did not feel like anything needed to be fixed at all. She placed her hand in his. 10 months later, on a clear December morning, Celeste Dunmore walked through the entrance of the Chicago Cultural Center in ivory silk and her grandmother's pearl earrings. The ceremony was small. She had chosen every detail herself. Flowers, candles, the exact weight of the afternoon light, because she had discovered that she had strong, specific opinions about beautiful things, and no one had told her those opinions needed to be smaller. Theron was already at the front of the room when the doors opened. He watched her walk toward him the way he had always watched her, with complete attention, as though nothing else in the space existed or required his consideration. He did not look at the flowers. He did not look at the guests. He looked at her. She walked with her head up, not because she was performing anything. She had stopped performing things some time ago. She walked that way because it was simply how she moved now, how she had always moved when no one was telling her she shouldn't. When she reached him, she smiled. It was the same smile she gave to panicking 19-year-olds on ordinary Tuesday nights. The same smile she gave to underpaid interns and overworked kitchen crews and every frightened newcomer who had ever needed someone patient enough to show them the ropes. Only now it was entirely his. At the end of the ceremony, walking back down the aisle, she paused beside the string quartet. "Thank you," she told them. "You were beautiful." She thanked the florist. She thanked the woman managing the guest book. She thanked the building attendant, who had unlocked a side door at 6:30 in the morning, so the setup crew could get in early. Theron watched her from 2 steps behind, with the expression that people who knew him well recognized as the thing he felt most and showed least. His oldest associate leaned close. "You knew, didn't you? Even back then, you already knew." Theron watched Celeste across the room as she laughed at something the florist said, her head tilted back, completely unguarded, occupying every inch of the space around her without apology. "I knew," he said quietly, the moment she stayed for someone who couldn't do anything for her in return. Outside, December air sharp and clear, the city silver under a pale winter sky. Celeste slipped her hand into his as they came through the doors into the light. He held it the way he held everything that mattered, with complete certainty and no intention whatsoever of letting go.